This is every overpowered thing you can do in Minecraft. With just a lever and some redstone dust, we're able to lag the game so much that we can basically freeze time. Since with the way that Mojang's coded redstone dust, it gets pretty laggy when you connect a bunch of these up to a lever. And then by using something like the fast right-click feature in a mod like Tweakaroo, we can flip that same lever on and off until eventually the redstone's updating so much that we basically slow time down to a crawl. And then that's where the fun begins, since one of the easiest tricks to pull off with this is to break bedrock. Or if you wanted to, you could use this to freeze time on a multiplayer server, build an entire structure, and then, when time switches back to normal, your friend will have no idea where that came from. But let me warn that in that case, you don't want to span the lever for too long, since doing it for longer than 60 seconds might just trigger Minecraft's watchdog to terminate the server. But as long as you freeze time in smaller increments, they'll be none the wiser. While other people debate whether a sword or an axe is better in PvP, you'll know that this is the real answer, since in all actuality, using end crystals for PvP can do so much more damage. On harder difficulties, this can deal 145 hit points in a single blow. And while it's expensive, you can set up this whole process with just 3 clicks. One for the obsidian, another for the crystal, and then lastly by punching it. And as long as you have some form of block in between your feet and the explosion, you yourself are going to take minimal damage, if at all. And unlike using beds in the nether, this is an option that we can choose in any of the dimensions that we want. This is going to level the playing field and level them into a pile of ashes. Alright, pop quiz. What do you do after accidentally hitting a zombie piglin? Well, the solution's simpler than you might think, since all we gotta do is take after this user on Reddit and dig out 2 blocks into the ground and then build 2 blocks up so that we're standing safe. And from there, if we hold crouch and move back over the hole, then at that point, all the zombie piglins are just gonna run into that confined space. And once we got them crammed in there like sardines, all we have to do is drop 2 pieces of gravel on top of them, and they'll all suffocate down there in the pit, making this the simplest way to get off their bad side. Though keep in mind that if you do this, you might run the risk of them spawning zombies as reinforcements. But as long as you're stayed up on their tower, you'll be able to easily dispatch them too, proving that this mistake was as easy to solve as it was to make. If you see this coming towards your base, be very afraid, since as it was designed by generic redstone genius, this cute little flying machine ends up being a devastating nuke. Since when there's virtually no limit to how many TNT minecarts you can put on top of a regular rail, we guarantee that when this flying machine hits its target, it's gonna have enough firepower to make even the worst nukes cry. So whether you're using this to get rid of a mountain or your friend's base, for how small of a footprint it is, this might be the easiest way to achieve world domination in your next world. With this setup, you'll never have to eat again, since the truth is, by just having regeneration on your beacon, starvation's no longer a worry for you, since the fact of the matter is that you'll actually out-heal the starvation damage. Now granted, you won't be able to sprint, but if you want to AFK at a farm without ever having to worry about starving to death, then just setting up a simple beacon like this could really be all you need. And that way we can turn even the deadliest of Minecraft game modes into essentially peaceful mode. And when you build up that regeneration beacon, consider grabbing 3 more, since by building your beacons overlapping with one another, we can ensure that each additional beacon that we add on only costs a fraction of the resource blocks for the pyramid. And if you want further proof, just look at the numbers. An individual 4 beacon setup would cost 656 iron blocks, but if we stack it together like this where they're overlapping, then it goes down to 216 of the same blocks. So while it's obviously expensive to get the beacons in the first place, let's at least make sure that we're taking the simple costs where we can, and that'll be a lot less stress on your iron farm, trust me. If you're planning to build with copper, you need to have this farm, since with this design by ENXO4, we're able to make an extremely simple footprint for what's going to be a very profitable farm. And the whole way that this works hinges around these zombie reinforcements, since under certain conditions, zombies are able to spawn other zombies to help them out in a fight. And what's better yet, these zombie reinforcements ignore the mob cap, meaning just like that, we're able to pile hundreds and hundreds of zombies into our farm. And at that point, as long as you have a looting 3 and mending sword, we can use an auto clicker to stay at this farm for hours. And at that point, the only question's gonna be, how do you store all that copper? Let's say you start in a new world and you need an XP farm. Well, we're gonna hop over to the nether, and not for blazes or anything like that, but rather to farm nether quartz. Since by just breaking one of these nether quartz ore, you're about guaranteed 3.5 experience points on average, meaning that if you just broke nether quartz ore alone, it would only take breaking 400 of these to get you from level 0 to 30. And with how prevalent and dense these veins can be, that's gonna be pretty easy to get. And plus, nether quartz has other uses too. I see this as a win-win. Here's how we're gonna turn this librarian villager into an infinite emerald farm, since after repeatedly zombifying and curing that villager, we're able to get it so that we can buy 1 bookshelf for 1 emerald. And then we can take that newfound bookshelf, break it on the ground, and that'll give us 3 books that we can sell back to it for 1 emerald apiece. And at that point, we're basically tripling our money every time we talk to the villager. And while that might seem like we're manipulating it, it's clearly got plenty of emeralds for itself, so maybe it's fine with sharing the wealth. In recent updates, iron farms have never been easier to to build. Since in the past we might have had to spend all the time to place down these doors in a specific way, now an entire iron farm could be kept to this small design. And as Razeworks shows off, we can build this iron farm design in 5 minutes, which that little of a time investment is able to get us 300 to 400 ingots per hour. So unless you start building with iron blocks, there's hardly even a need to go past this rate. It's really a no-brainer to have one of these in your world. If you've got access to the top of the nether roof, then you got yourself a food farm. Since for only 30 minutes of your time, you could build this extremely simple hoglin farm. And that way we're getting ourselves both cooked pork chops and leather too. And probably the best part about this is that it requires no complicated redstone or anything like that. Literally all we're doing is just scaring away the hoglins with warped fungus. And then by setting the light level of the farm so that only the hoglins can spawn, we're ensuring that when we go up top here, we'll have enough food to supply multiple players on the server with literal food for years. By following this user's lead, all we need is a pair of leather boots and some powdered snow to get ourselves up and away and leave no trace behind. Since with just 2 powdered snow buckets, we're able to pillar ourselves up and then bridge across infinitely. And while it could take some time to learn the technique to do this, as soon as you get that down, you can get this going about as fast as you can pillar up anyway. So if you're trying to escape from someone in a PvP situation, at least this way you're not leaving behind a tall tower as evidence to where you went. It might not look it, but this redstone is entirely wireless. And you'll see as much when we flip this lever. This design by 2No2Name has an infinite range, just as long as you're in the same dimension. The way this works is based off an obscure item mechanic where the game will store a unique entity ID, and then the delay it takes for that hopper to pick up the item could differ depending on that ID. And so when our receiver checks for that specifically timed entity creation, that'll sync up with our transmitter and allow us to have virtually infinite range on our redstone. But keep in mind, this isn't super reliable in single player. It's mostly intended for server use. But when you got it there, it essentially gives us 5G to use in our world. And that just blows my mind. Let's be honest, some Minecraft worlds are better than others. And that means that if you were to use a seed like the one on screen, you'll find that from the get-go, you're instantly better off than other people. Because by just simply spawning next to a mushroom island, you're essentially playing on peaceful mode, regardless of how bad things get. Since the only mobs that are able to spawn down here in the dark are bats. And that way, you're able to go caving around your base without any worries. And you can also do it without lighting up the area. So as long as you don't run into any monster spawners nearby, this will turn your hardcore world into the easiest that it can be. And as soon as you figure out how to get wood when you're on this island, that's all your problems solved. With this glitch, you can sprint forever without losing a single hunger bar. And the way it happens is that if you simply punch an enemy while you're sprinting, and then continue to sprint afterwards, that'll negate all of the sprint's hunger drain. And as user ElliotX shows off, this could be a game changer for speedrunning, especially because it's allowed in runs. But keep in mind that you will still lose hunger when you're jumping during this. And the way it all works is that the game thinks that when you punch, that you'd stop sprinting. So in that case, the server sees you as walking, but the client still believes that it's sprinting. And then that desyncs enough for us to manipulate and get all of this extra speed without ever having to do it on an empty stomach. If you're playing on peaceful mode, keep this one in mind, since the truth is that you're going overkill if you're putting Respiration 3 on your helmet, since in this difficulty, putting any level of respiration on your helmet will mean that you cannot drown. And the reason for this is that the peaceful mode regeneration rate is enough to actually keep up with the drowning damage that you take when you have respiration, so don't waste your levels trying to go overkill on this. If you're going to go explore in the ancient cities, remember to bring yourself a hoe, since with this tool in particular, you'll be able to instant mine through all of the sculk blocks, which not only gives you a quick way to gain levels, but you're also likely to uncover large amounts of diamond ore. Since the way that diamonds are coated, they're more likely to spawn when they're covered by other blocks. And considering sculk counts for that, we're essentially just peeling off a blanket and waking up some sleeping diamonds. And by the point that you find them, you'll have plenty of levels left to enchant them, making this one of the most profitable ways to equip yourself. But you might be wondering how you even explore ancient cities without having to worry about you-know-who. Well, Ilamango's got you covered. Since with this machine, if we just shoot 6 arrows onto the wool block at the bottom of the arrow chamber, then we can close it back up and flip this on and off switch on the hopper clock, which all comes together to mean that we're completely disabling warden spawning. So even though you might hear warden sounds coming from this machine, the actual truth is those are the sounds of failed warden spawn attempts, since when you look around, you're not going to see any. And not only will this work in the ancient city that you built it within, but because of the built-in chunk loading, we guarantee that this works in any ancient city that you step into in the world, just as long as you're the player that shot the arrows into the machine. And at that point, we can use our hoe to get rid of all the skulk shriekers, so that even when this machine isn't working, we're still not going to have to worry about the warden. Forget smelting your items in a furnace, instead you want to build this. Since you're just 9 hoppers and a chest boat, we're able to make the poor man's super smelter. And we did it all without redstone, since any items that we put into the chest boat will get evenly dispersed amongst our furnaces, and that'll give us a 9 times return on a regular furnace. And hey, if you want it even better, I'd recommend switching these out for blast furnaces, and then you've got an 18 times return on that regular furnace. Which is great to have that much cooking power, but now the question is, how are you going to fuel it? And that's where carpets come in. Since as you see in this design designed by Eagle Eye, all it takes is having a couple of sticky pistons and coral fans to get ourselves infinite amounts of carpet, which is not only nice for decorating, but more importantly, we can also use these carpets as a way of fuel. And with a farm designed as this, that's 3.4 million carpet that we're getting to cook in our furnaces. At that point, I don't care how fast of a super smelter you have, it's not going to be able to go through all that fuel. Don't underestimate tipped arrows, since by just hitting yourself with one of these slow falling arrows, that'll give you just the right amount of slow falling effect that when we partner with a Riptide 3 Trident, we can use this to launch ourselves sky high. And the reason we use an arrow instead of a potion is so that when we reach the top of our ascent, we aren't still going to have the slow falling effect, because using slow falling with an elytra is just sad. And especially with how easy it is to get tipped arrows in Bedrock Edition, I think there's more than enough of a reason to try this out in your world. Forget using obsidian for your blast chambers, because ever since 1.19, waterlogged leaves can work just as well. For one, it's going to take a lot less time to mine all the blocks necessary to do this, and then when you get all those blocks, it's not even going to be a cut to your function. They'll work just as well for your concrete converter. And at that point, unless you need obsidian for another portal or enchantment table, I really don't think it's worth grabbing when you got this. TNT duplication machines are great, but getting slime blocks and coral early on is a real tough business. So instead, we can take after this user's design and make an easy early game cobble farm. Since by supplementing our build with a lot more observers, we're able to glitch out the TNT just the same and essentially duplicate it for all our uses. And then with enough cobblestone generators packed into the inside of the blast chamber, this is a fully automatic way to get loads of cobblestone, which will be handy because as soon as you do get a silk touch pick, you're really not going to get a lot more cobblestone from that point. So better to stock up while you can. If you're mining blocks like this, you gotta stop. Since the truth of the matter is that in Bedrock Edition, if you stand back at max reach distance and mine, you'll actually be mining faster than you do when you're right up close. So if you're going branch mining in Minecraft, you'll just want to take a couple steps back, at least until this bug gets patched. But with how long it's been on the bug tracker, I don't imagine that's going to be soon. Here's how to make your spyglass even better. Since the way that the spyglass works, it actually modifies your existing FOV. So while we could use our regular FOV and have it zoom in this much, if we lower that FOV to the bottom at 30, then you'll notice when we use the spyglass, it zooms in even closer. And then if you've got an additional zoom mod on top of that, you can really use this trick to get up close and personal, and then immediately switch off the lower FOV, because playing the rest of the game this way is miserable. And with that, folks, YouTube thinks that you might like this video, so see if they're right and have a good one, alright?